Bengals fans, this is one of those conversations that can completely divide the fan base right now, because a brand new trade proposal is suddenly putting a major name on Cincinnati's radar. And honestly, the more you dig into it, the more interesting it becomes. We're talking about a proven Pro Bowl pass rusher, a guy who has consistently produced pressure, sacks, forced fumbles, and playoff-level football over the last several years, and now there's growing discussion about whether the Bengals should seriously consider making a move before this defense enters a completely new era. And here's the thing that makes this even more fascinating. This isn't about desperation. This isn't about Cincinnati having a terrible defensive line. Quite the opposite, actually. The Bengals have already made several aggressive moves this offseason to completely reshape the identity of this defense, especially in the trenches. So now the real question becomes this. If the front office already likes the direction of the defensive line, would they still be willing to swing big one more time for a player like Josh Sweat if the price suddenly became reasonable? Before we dive all the way into this situation, make sure you hit that like button, subscribe to the channel so you never miss any Bengals updates throughout the offseason, because things are moving fast right now, and there are still plenty of major questions surrounding this roster heading into the season. Now let's get to what really matters. According to the discussion highlighted from Sporting News, the Cincinnati Bengals are being viewed as one of the teams that should potentially explore a trade for Arizona Cardinals edge rusher Josh Sweat. The report specifically connected Cincinnati and Dallas as possible landing spots for the veteran defender, and the reasoning behind it actually makes a lot of sense once you start looking at how the Bengals are trying to build this defense moving forward. The key point in the report centered around the idea that Cincinnati may not necessarily need another edge rusher, especially after already adding defensive talent this offseason, but if Sweat became available for something like a third or fourth-round pick, then suddenly the entire conversation changes. That's where things get very real. Because, let's be honest here, there's a massive difference between trading premium draft capital for a veteran player versus taking advantage of a discounted opportunity to add someone who has already proven he can consistently impact games at a high level. The moment the compensation drops into that third or fourth round territory, you start asking yourself whether the Bengals could realistically pass on a move like this if they believe they're trying to maximize the defense immediately. And one thing that was made very clear throughout this discussion is that nobody is suggesting Cincinnati should give up a first or second round pick for Josh Sweat. That's not the idea here at all. The appeal comes from the possibility of adding a productive veteran without sacrificing the future core of the roster. Josh Sweat is still only 29 years old according to the discussion in the report, which means the belief is that he should still have several productive years left. On top of that, he's under contract for multiple seasons, so this would not be some short-term rental situation. This would be an actual investment into the defensive front, if the Bengals decided to pursue it. But the biggest reason this conversation is gaining traction is because of the way Cincinnati appears to be rebuilding the philosophy of the pass rush entirely. For years, according to the discussion, the Bengals' defense leaned heavily on star power from one dominant player instead of overwhelming teams with waves of pass rushers. The report specifically referenced how the defense previously relied more on one player creating disruption rather than deploying a constant rotation of fresh, explosive defenders attacking the quarterback throughout the game. Now, compare that to what Cincinnati has been doing this offseason. The Bengals have reportedly added multiple pieces across the defensive line, including Dexter Lawrence, while also bringing in several younger pass-rushing prospects and rotational players that could dramatically increase the athleticism and depth of the unit. The discussion highlighted names like B.J. Hill, Landon Robinson, Boy Mayfie, Cassius Howell, Shamar Stewart, and Miles Murphy as part of this evolving defensive front. The entire strategy appears centered around creating waves of pass rushers with fresh legs, athletic burst, and versatility instead of relying too heavily on one player carrying the pressure package. That's what makes the Josh Sweat idea so interesting. Because if Cincinnati truly believes this defense can become more explosive through rotation and depth, then adding another proven edge presence could potentially elevate the entire unit even further. Instead of simply hoping younger players develop quickly, you would be inserting another experienced player who already knows how to finish plays at the NFL level. And according to the discussion in the file, the Bengals apparently like the direction they're heading defensively already. The report repeatedly emphasized that Cincinnati does not absolutely need Josh Sweat. That's important. This isn't being framed as some emergency situation. It's more about the possibility of turning a good defensive front into something much deeper and more dangerous. Then the conversation shifted toward Sweat himself and why he remains such an attractive option. The report described him as a consistently productive player throughout his NFL career. Most fans recognize him from his years with Philadelphia, where he spent the first 7 seasons of his career and won a Super Bowl in 2024 before eventually joining Arizona. What stands out most is the consistency of his pass rush production. According to the numbers discussed in the file, Sweat has continued generating sacks, quarterback hits, pressures, and forced fumbles throughout his career. His biggest sack seasons reportedly came in 2022 and again recently with 12 sacks in the most recent season mentioned in the discussion. And it wasn't just sacks. The report specifically pointed out his ability to create forced fumbles, pressure quarterbacks consistently, and make smart plays overall as a defender. The overall picture being painted is that Sweat is viewed as a complete edge player, not just someone who occasionally gets hot as a pass rusher. The discussion also described him as quick to the football, effective in generating quarterback hurries, and generally reliable in making the right reads defensively. That matters because Cincinnati is clearly trying to build a defense with more athleticism and more disruptive players across the board, rather than simply chasing raw sack numbers. At the same time, there's another side to this conversation that cannot be ignored at all: money. Because once the discussion moved away from the football fit, the focus immediately shifted toward the financial reality of making this kind of move happen. According to the file, Josh Sweat carries a cap hit north of $16 million this season as part of a 4-year contract worth $76 million overall. And the opinion expressed throughout the discussion was very straightforward. The Bengals currently do not really have the cap flexibility to absorb that contract comfortably without making another significant financial move first. That's where Joe Burrow's contract suddenly enters the conversation. The report repeatedly referenced the idea that Cincinnati would likely need to restructure Burrow's deal if they truly wanted to create the cap space necessary for another major addition like Josh Sweat. And apparently, there's frustration from the perspective shared in the report because the Bengals have not already done that earlier in the offseason. The discussion suggested that restructuring Burrow's contract sooner could have potentially opened the door for other defensive additions in free agency as well. Still, the overall tone remained very aggressive about the idea of pushing all in if Cincinnati believes this roster is ready to compete immediately. The thought process basically comes down to this: if the Bengals are already making major moves this offseason and clearly trying to strengthen the roster aggressively, then why stop now if an opportunity like Josh Sweat becomes available at the right price? And honestly, you can understand why this is becoming such a huge debate among fans. On one side, there are people who believe the Bengals have already added enough talent and should trust the younger players they've invested in. There's excitement around the development of guys like Myles Murphy, Shamar Stewart, Cassius Howell, and others mentioned throughout the discussion. There's also optimism surrounding the overall depth of the defensive line after the additions made this offseason. The report repeatedly pointed out that this is not a weak unit anymore. In fact, the suggestion was made that this could potentially become one of the better defensive fronts Cincinnati has fielded in recent years. But on the other side of the argument, adding Josh Sweat could potentially push the ceiling even higher. Because when you look around the AFC North, every team understands that games are often won in the trenches. If Cincinnati truly wants to dominate physically up front, then adding another proven pass rusher to an already improving unit could create serious problems for opposing offenses. The discussion even went as far as suggesting that Cincinnati could potentially field the best pass rush in the AFC North if a move like this happened. That's a bold statement considering the elite edge talent elsewhere in the division, but it shows how highly the potential fit is being viewed. At the end of the day, though, everything circles back to two things: the trade compensation and the money. If Arizona's asking price stays reasonable, and if Cincinnati becomes willing to restructure contracts to create flexibility, then suddenly this idea stops sounding impossible and starts sounding like something the Bengals could legitimately explore. What makes this entire story fascinating is that it perfectly reflects where the Bengals are as a team right now. They're trying to balance long-term development with immediate urgency. They're building depth while also searching for impact. And they're trying to figure out whether one more aggressive move could completely transform the identity of this defense heading into the season. Now, the big question is for you, Bengals fans. If the Cardinals were truly willing to move Josh Sweat for a third or fourth round pick, and if restructuring contracts made the money work, would you want Cincinnati to go all in and make the trade happen? Or do you think the Bengals should trust the younger edge rushers already on the roster and avoid spending more money on another veteran addition? Drop your thoughts in the comments, because this is one of the biggest debates surrounding the Bengals defense right now. And honestly, there are strong arguments on both sides. Who dey?